The singing is way too much. Oh, you mean
Shabbos, everyone. Shkoch to Rabbi for the beautiful, beautiful Shira. And Shkoch to Rabbi Tzvi for the beautiful spread here tonight. Baruch Hashem. Steve, who are our sponsors for this evening?
Yehuda Book Altar for sponsoring commemoration of the Yeshua of his father, Abba Shalom had on Kristallnacht 85 years ago. And also to Elliot Pepper for sponsoring on honor of his father who was visiting here this evening. Raise your hand, Mr. Pepper.
Mr. Pepper.
Raise your hand.
Shmuel dedicated the shir in your honor.
Oh.
Shmuel dedicated the shir in your honor.
Oh, Baruch Hashem.
That's it. Baruch Hashem. All right, Chavra, let's begin. So first of all, I wanna begin just by apologizing for the time change, but appreciating everyone for accommodating it. Hopefully, Meretz Hashem next week we'll be back to a regular schedule. So we have a little bit of a shorter shir tonight, but I didn't want a week to go by without us learning the Torah of the Piyash. So we're picking up in Meretz Hashem on page 56. Nearing the end, page 56. So remember again in this section, so the Piyash is really outlining the mechanics. How does the Chaburah work? How does the Chaburah work? So remember again, our whole goal of learning this Sefer is Emir Hashem to become a Chaburah, Bnai Machshava Tova. And now again, in this last part of the Sefer, the Piaget is saying, after you've learned all of the material, right? So we know now kind of like what our avod is, what we have to do. Now, he's actually focusing on the specifics of how the Chaburah, how the group itself runs and how it's constituted. But of course, what we've really begun to see is that even in the instructions about how the group is supposed to run, the Piaget is teaching us incredible and beautiful lessons. So take a look. Page 56, paragraph Gimel. So the Chaburah, Bnei Machshava Torah Chaburah, has to gather in a particular place. Has to decide on a place where they're going to meet, ultimately, and that's where they should continue to meet. So this, what is he trying to impress over here? There's a concept of a makom kavua, right? What's the whole chab of a makom kavua? So makom kavua, set place, allows a person to go ahead and have kavanah, because again, I know where I'm going, I know where I'm sitting, I'm oriented. Same thing over here when this Chaburah takes place, the goal is have it in one place. Have a makom, because when one is situated in a particular makom, that allows them to better concentrate. Lo pachos migimel pamim b'shavua v'chalamar b'harezim meshuba. So this is interesting. The Chaburah should get together no less than 3 times a week. No less than 3 times a week. But he says, obviously, if you want to do more than that, that's even better. Lav Dafka has to have a spread like this, 3 times a week. But I will say, again, we know this just from learning this Sefer. We know the impact that it's had on our lives just by learning it once a week. Can you imagine, like, if you're doing this more than once a week, just the impact it has on your life in totality? Therefore, the Piaget says really at least 3 times a week. Paragraph Dalet is incredible. He says, "Kishis asfu lo yidaru divarim b'telim." This is very important. When the Chaburah gets together, they have to make sure not to battle, not to engage in just like frivolous behavior. Sometimes, it's beautiful to get together with a beautiful chavra. What's the Yetzer Hara when you get together with a beautiful chavra? You want to schmooze, you want to talk, you want to this, you want to that. And again, there's a beauty in it because you're building relationships. But the Piaget says you just have to be careful that when we get together as a Chaburah, that ultimately we remain focused on the spiritual task at hand, which is to advance ourselves, and not chas v'shalom to just allow it to become just like a social circle. He says, "Rak yilamneit kol echad davar sherotze lamot ze gemara ze mishnayis." Now this is interesting because here you really begin to see how the Piaget really pulls everything together. So what he says over here is as follows. He says when the Chaburah gets together, the idea is everybody starts off by learning their own thing, right? So the Chaburah gets together, this person wants to learn Gemara, this person wants to learn Mishnayos. Everybody can learn their own thing. He says, Aval shir echad, yikavu lilmod kulam yachad. But the Chaburah, the group, should learn one thing together. In pamachas b'shavu, or yoser pamim, one time, or more than one time, kefi sheyes ratzur ova chaverim. And they should learn whatever the majority of people agree to. Or bifrat inyane hadracha v'chein kuntros hazeh shekulam yilamdu yachad. And certainly, specifically, with a focus on like Musar and Tashkafa, and certainly to learn this pamphlet, to learn this Sefer, which gives the Chaburah direction. So we'll say, which we begin to see something very interesting, because I think many of us have like wondered, so you form this Chaburah, so what is the Chaburah learning? What is the Chaburah learning? So of course, answer number one is, Bnei Machshava Tova Chaburah is learning Bnei Machshava Tova. But as we've seen, we've gone lightning speed through this, right? It's only taken us a year and a half. We're not finished yet. But really, you could actually, if you're doing this 3 times a week, you could finish this up relatively quickly. So what happens afterwards? So the Piaget says, it's okay. The goal is for the Chaburah to learn together. And the Chaburah learning together is really comprised of 2 parts. One part is everyone learning their own thing, whatever they want to learn. And the other part is some type of joint learning project, some type of joint learning initiative. And I will say, think about this just a moment. What is it that's accomplished with this Bnei Machshava Tova Chaburah? What is it? So what's accomplished is you're surrounding yourself with growth-oriented people. That's what this is. Surround yourself in a Chaburah of Bnai Machshava Tova, a people who want to grow, people who want to transform themselves from servants to sons, like you saw in the beginning of the Sefer. Surround yourself with those kind of people. And so if we're all sitting in a room together, even if we're all learning different things, the fact that I am surrounded by growth-oriented people, by people who want to become the best version of themselves, even if we're learning different things, that has a dramatic impact. Paragraph Hey. When you're learning, that is incredibly important. In general, it's important. When you're learning something, specifically what he calls me'inyane hadracha. Inyane hadracha means those things which kind of help you to lead a meaningful and impactful life. Lo ya'avru alav ka'al eza sipor hamaisa, rak yilamdu menachosu be'iyim. Don't just gloss over it like you would read over a story, but rather delve into it and try to learn it. Try to learn it with a greater level of depth. I will say, I'll point something interesting for just a moment. You know, many of us here, we do the daf together every day, and the daf is beautiful. The daf is incredible. The daf is spectacular. The daf is life itself. What's the danger of the daf? The danger of the daf is it could condition you to learn everything quickly and somewhat superficially, right? At daf yomi we move. We move, right? There's no falling asleep at the wheel, because, right, you spit, right? What happens? What happens when you wake up? What happens when you wake up?
You said 95%.
Yes.
It's being there, 100%, 100%.
Yes, Sammy, what you missed.
Yeah, right. No, but I'm saying, yes, 95% is being there. But when you wake up, right, you're like, where are we? Like what? Like l'chaim, right? What happened? Like, where am I now? So what's interesting is that I noticed in myself a little bit that sometimes when you're learning the daf, so kind of what you become accustomed to is like a little bit of that same dynamic of kind of like quick and somewhat like, I don't even want to call it superficial, I'll call it panoramic view, right? In other words, I'm not getting every single detail, but I'm getting like a couple of major salient points, a piece of halacha, a piece of hashkafa, and like that's it. So I just want to point out, so that sometimes we could transfer that mindset a little bit into our other forms of learning as well. So the Piagetz says it's just important that whatever the Chaburah is learning, learn it in depth. Learn it in depth. In other words, take your time to process, take your time to analyze it. Don't learn it superficially or haphazardly. Don't run through it quickly as one who glosses over a story. He goes on, he says, Ach yikaimu heim es divrei hadracha sefer zeh v'ech yikavu es hadavar b'kirba. We'll say it's actually incredible. When you learn, one of the most important things that a person has to focus on when they learn is how do you take what you learn and internalize it inside of. We'll say, is that not one of the hardest things, right? We learn incredible concepts all the time. And then what ends up happening, right? It comes in one ear and it goes out the other. Now it kind of like jingles around in there a little bit, right? It stays in there, but like just stuff comes in and stuff goes out, and it just happens so quick. And I want to retain it. I want to hold on to it. So the Piaget says one of the most important things Rabbi says, after a person learns something that they feel is potentially transformative, I then have to try to figure out, how do I retain it? How do I keep it? Right? I'm sorry? So first of all, absolutely. Chazara, reviewing things, but even just reviewing things ultimately, again, allows you to retain it. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to implement it in the way that you live. So the question just is, how do I take, this is the greatest struggle, right? Each of us is such a repository of incredible amounts of information. The truth is, my problem in Yiddishkeit, my problem in life is not that I don't have enough information. I have more than enough information. I don't have an information problem, I have an implementation problem. And that's a very important distinction. And because what ends up happening, says, just think about it for just a second, right? How many times have we come here, Baruch Hashem, and like Piaget says something, and like literally like, Rebbe, Piaget, you just changed my life. And then what happens? It's like, oh, there's Kugel, right? There's Kugel, right? And then like, it's like, and right, it's your bad, right? And then no, it's human nature, it's interesting. And like, then maybe even like an hour after the shir, I feel great, but nothing's really changed in my life. And certainly, again, 2 days later, I'm often just the same person. But what's the pshat? It's not that I don't care. It's that I absorbed information, but didn't take the time for implementation. And the Piaget says, and that's one of the profound concepts of a Chaburah, Bnei Machshava Tova Chaburah, is not just learning. I always say, the truth is today, in today's day and age, you don't need a Chaburah to learn, right? Think about it just a moment. Everything is available anywhere, right? I don't need a group. I don't need a shir. I don't need a Chaburah. I don't need anything. You're right. To absorb information, you could do that on your own, right? If you have a device, Baruch Hashem, we live in a time and age, you could get anything and everything you want. Information, no problem. A Chaburah, the power of a Chaburah, the power in general of surrounding yourself with good people is that they aid you in the implementation. Now, when you surround yourself with good Chaverim, you push each other. What are you doing? What are you doing? We learn this idea. How are you implementing it? What are you doing in life? What are you doing in life? And suddenly, again, there's a chevra that's not simply pushing each other for information or to learn, but it's a chevra that's pushing each other ultimately to actualize implementation. It's incredible. He goes on, he says, V'az yisgala lifnehem inyonim shonim b'sefer ubichlal kol mi me'achavria she'yipa b'mocho eza ra'yon tov beinim yipa lo b'shah shenimtza yachad im achaverim bein shehu b'beis u'berachov yomer lifnei chavera v'achaverim yishmu ulos. This is interesting. Another part of the Bnei Machshava Tova Chaburah is that when one of the members of the Chaburah has an idea, he should share it. He should share it. Share it with everyone. Right? So you're learning in the Chaburah, and suddenly you have an epiphany, you have this insight, you have this idea. He should share it. Now I will say, what's interesting is that Piaget then feels compelled to make another statement, which is, so the person who has the idea should share it, and what should everyone else do? Listen. Right? So he's got to tell you to listen, because I'll say, we all know this. A lot of times people are talking, right? And I am not listening. I look like I'm listening. I look like I'm attentive, right? But I am, right? Say, I have this, to whatever degree possible, I try never to have meetings on Zoom, because I know what I do when I'm on Zoom meetings, and they're incredibly productive, because I clean out my email, I clean out my, it's fantastic, it's great. I don't know what happened in the meeting, right? But I was very productive. You know, it's interesting, like we've kind of like mastered the art of looking attentive, but not really being attentive. So the Piaget says the power of this Chaburah is that halacha l'maisa, if one of the members has an idea, share it. And everyone else has to genuinely listen. He goes on, he says, it's incredible. He says, Ki afilu, listen to this. Ki afilu im tes pamim lo yeh mamish b'dvarav, yochol liyos b'pam asiri davar tov bo. Shows it's incredible. The Piaget, listen to this phrase. Piaget says, truthfully, probably 9 out of 10 times, whoever is saying the idea, probably the idea is not worth anything. Which, by the way, speaks out to percentages of meaningful things that people say, right? 9 out of 10 times the Piaget says probably the thought that's going to be shared, probably not worth anything. But you know what's worth it? The 10th time. The 10th time. When someone shares with you that nugget, right? That piece of gold, that little piece of wisdom that forever changes the way you think, the way you look at life, and the way you look at yourself. So here's the issue. You only get to the 10th time if you go through the first 9. I'll say it's such an incredible idea. And the truth is, I'll say, it's actually true, by the way, in relationships also. I'll say sometimes in relationships, right, it could happen that in a relationship, maybe one spouse likes to talk more than the other one does. It could happen, right? It could happen. Not assigning roles. I'm not assigning roles to anyone, but it could happen. It could, Yeshomrim, right? It could happen. So what happens? So sometimes, I will say, sometimes the less talkative spouse makes the mistake of kind of tuning out. You know, with enough like head nods and sure and okay and I'm sorry. You know, with enough, if you pepper those responses, right, and you space them out, right, in certain timed intervals, you could pretty much look like the most engaged person ever. Like, I really feel heard, right? You can even get one of those. I'll say the problem with that is, in every relationship, there's always some deep and profound sentiment that is expressed. Now, maybe it's not expressed 9 out of 10 times. But the problem is, if you're not plugged in for the first 9, you'll miss the 10th. So much of relationships, Rabbosai, is listening to stuff that doesn't actually matter. It doesn't matter. It's not really consequential. It doesn't, right? As they say, Eino Malive, Eino Morid. It just doesn't make a difference. But that 10th time, it really does. That 10th time, it really does. But like the Piaget says, excuse me, if you're not present for the first 9, then you never get to the 10th. Such an incredible yesod in relationships, about being plugged in. And it's the same thing with the Chevra. So at the end of the day, one of the Bnai Chaburah have an idea, everybody listen up. And you know what's going to happen? 9 times people are going to say, that guy, why does he always have to share his great, epiphanies, right? Because you got to get to the 10th time. Because we're going to say, everybody talks, everybody listens, because you get to the 10th time. Because it's gold. I'm just telling you, it's relationship gold. It's relationship gold. You always have to be attentive. Even if 9 out of 10 times is inconsequential, because the 10th time will make all the difference in the world. Incredible. You can do it. Absolutely.
It's pretty painful.
We'll talk
it's a great article you're reading on your phone? It's like...
Oh, that's the worst.
That's
the worst. See, you're not even pretending to pay attention.
Right.
Oh, no, that's terrible. That's terrible.
People given to women, right?
All right, we're not going to get into it. Again, I don't want to say different relationships have different... No, Chaburah, on a serious note, I'm just telling you, one day you'll thank me for these pearls of wisdom, right? that I delivered to you, that you're ingesting between bites of yapchik, right? But I'm just telling you, like one day, I promise you, Dr. Kropkin is here.
We're waiting for the 10th time.
Right? Ready for the 10th? I'm sorry. Ready for the 10th time? Okay. I'm just saying this is it, right? It is the 10th time, by the way, right? And first of all, I'm 10 for 10. I'm 10 for 10. Right? And it's not me, it's the Piaget says 10 for 10. Anyway, okay, we'll go back there. So Gemara says as follows. The Gemara listen to this. He says, he quotes over here, Ki afilu tes pamim lo yiem amamish b'dvarav, yochol lihios b'pam asiri davar tov bo. Listen to this. Ukimo she'isa b'zar HaKadosh, lepamim gam bi'alkuto shala'ani yicholim limso margalit. Right? It's actually such a beautiful expression. That sometimes even in the bundle of the poor person, sometimes you could find a jewel. Right? The poor person is picking up all the garbage, all the different stuff. And sometimes in his peckle that has all of the garbage, sometimes nestled in there is even a jewel. So again, 9 out of 10 times it's nothing, but the 10th time is the jewel. The 10th time is the gold. The 10th time makes all the difference. But again, you only get to the 10th if you're willing to go through the first 9.
Does Rebbe feel that the Piaget's not makes that a point in his writing as far as some very important messages? It's almost like repetitive because of this idea?
It could be the Piaget's in the style is repetitive. It is repetitive. You find that amongst many of the Hasidic masters like that. I don't know. Like, is it beshita for that? Like the repetitive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It could be. I never thought about that, but maybe that's good for style. Possible. We'll say one more paragraph, then we'll stop. Ubichlal kol Machshava Tova be'inyan avodah shemischalish v'moach v'leva Yisrael. So we'll say this is actually very beautiful. Furthermore, says the Piaget in general, any good thought that comes about in one's relationship, in his avodas Hashem, from his mind or from his heart, min had shall kol nafshahu, im had shall kol tzaka shall nefilas. Oh, shall call simcha b'shah sha'olihi. So we'll say this is incredible. Anytime, this is very important because here the Piaget just got finished saying that whenever a person has a thought to share, you should share it. Everyone else should listen because even if 9 out of 10 times it's nothing really consequential, the 10th time will be major. The Piaget says it's important to understand though, whenever someone has a thought of spirituality, that comes from a very deep place inside of you. So his lashon over here is it could be a whisper of your soul, or it could be a whisper, ultimately again, of heartbreak, a whisper from the failures that you've experienced in life. Oh, shall call simcha. Sorry. Oh, shall call simcha b'shasholi. Aval lo yechfetzu hachaver hamashim es rayonosem rak lavalo zman kedei lahosif diburam ulaharos chachmasam bilbad. So I will say. So now, just to tie these 2 points together. So why is it? I will say, it's different. You see this, by the way, with different kinds of rebbeim, right? That there were certain rebbeim that were known that if a Talmud said something in Shir, that the Rebbe did not like, the Rebbe would hand his head to him on a platter. On a platter. Like Rebbe Soloveitchik was very exacting, very exact. When someone said something that didn't make sense, he would tell them. It didn't make sense. So, in 2023, everybody would be very offended by that, right? And very taken aback. It used to be men were men, right? And people were able to go ahead and take critique and criticism. No, let's say it's very true. No, if we're honest, no one could take critique or criticism today, right? Everybody is very, very fragile. Everybody's very fragile. But Lamaisa, understand that there is, well, what's going on over there on that side of the table?
I'm just speaking on it.
Okay.
It's resonating with
You went. He's bringing you into this.
He's just sitting here. Ellie, come on, man up.
So I will say. So I'm just pointing out over here that on one hand, so you see why would Rabbi Soloveitchik be so stark with students when they said something that didn't make sense? Because also he was trying to teach discipline of thought. That much of life is don't say the first thing that comes to your mind. Think it through, process it, refine it, and then say it. I mentioned this before. Rav Pam Chassidus Chaburah, the Yeshiva of Tarvadas, said, "What's the worst word in the English language? Worst word?" He said, "Whatchamacallit." Whatchamacallit. He says, why? Because if you say whatchamacallit, then what? It means you have not fully thought through what it is that you want to say. And if you don't know exactly what you want to say, how you want to say it, don't talk. Don't talk. Wait. So there were Rebbeim of yesteryear, again, who when the students would say something that wasn't correct or didn't make sense, the Rebbe would literally give it to them. Not to be mean and not to be hurtful, but it was chinuch. Think before you speak. Gibush ra'ayonot, right? Formulate your ideas. Let's make sure that something makes it. So it's interesting here that the Piaget is saying the opposite, right? The Piaget is saying in this Chaburah, if someone has a thought, say it. And he prepares us. By the way, chances are, if you're a betting man, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. So why say it? We will say because the Piaget says because every spiritual thought has its origins in the soul. Every spiritual thought is some deeper energy from within that is trying to come out. Now, sometimes the thought is only half-baked, right? Sometimes the thought is a bit premature. Sometimes the thought needs to be crafted a little bit differently or a little bit better. But every single spiritual thought that a person has, even if it turns out to be factually incorrect, right? Or it can be disproving, or it wasn't the right formulation, where did it come from? It came from the Neshama. Both say, now watch this. So the Piaget says, both say, what is life all about? We learn this off. What is life all about? Life is about unlocking your inner spiritual energy. Life is about taking the Neshama, which is so often held captive, and setting it free. So how do you do that? So sometimes when a spiritual thought comes to your mind, you know what you just got to do? What do you have to do? You got to say it. You got to say it. But 1 second, maybe it's correct. Maybe it's okay. Even if it's not correct, it's okay. Why? Because what are you doing? What you're doing is you're connecting with your neshama, and you're untrapping that energy. Right? You're unbinding the neshama. Unbinding or unbounding? Unbinding. Why am I asking you guys? Yeah, I know. Israel. Okay, Israel. Yeah, I know. Got it. 10 out of 10. So unbinding. Right? I'm unbinding the neshama. I'm unbinding the neshama. The Piaget that says, you have a spiritual thought, say it. Go with it. Experience it. Because understand what you're doing is you're tapping into that energy that is within. I will say, it's such an incredible, and by the way, we're going to stop over here for tonight, and I apologize just because of time, but Lamaisa, I will say, it's not just true with thoughts, it's true with feelings as well. A lot of times, we're not confident, or we're not, confident is the wrong word, we're not comfortable with allowing ourselves to feel, right? If we feel like we're going to cry, like we stifle it. We stifle it. Or I feel like we're going to get very emotional, we stifle it. And I will say again, understand emotion also stems from the neshama. So the last thing you ever want to do with emotion is stifle it. Now again, we're talking about a healthy expression of emotion, right? Yelling at someone or being verbally abusive. We're not talking about that. That's unchecked, unhealthy emotion. But sometimes we feel real things in life, and for whatever the reason, we feel the need to like suppress it, right? Suppress it, or just like kind of like hold it back a little bit. And the Piaget says, no, feel it. Feel it. Just like when you have the thought, say it. Because that thought comes from your neshama, and unlock that power. When you have that feeling of Osai, allow yourself to feel it. Because at the end of the day, those feelings, they come from inside your neshama. All right, so we'll stop over here for tonight. Emir Hashem, I would say that we're going to finish the Sefer next week, but that would be false. So, Emir Hashem, sorry. No, 2 more weeks. I think 2 more weeks, Emir Hashem. My goal is before Chanukah. Emir Hashem. We'll say, Shemen Nishkaya.
My side, if everybody's free.
Yeah.
Anyone,